Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen tries to steal my dogs. Big mistake. After that, don't bother me unless it's an emergency. And after that, am I the jerk for calling my brother-in-law a joke of a father in front of his family? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get to steal anyone's dog. Fine with me. I prefer cats anyway. Meow. Don't ever do that again. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen tries to steal my dogs. Big mistake. This happened when I was 12 years old, and I figured I'd share my experience with an entitled family who tried to steal my hunting dog. I grew up on the family farm in the middle of nowhere. We own approximately 350 acres, and we have a ridiculously long driveway, and you can't even see the house from the main road. So often, people see our dogs and they think that they're lost and pick them up. We have collars with our contact info that are always on them because of this fact. My parents are big on not hunting or removing wild animals unless they're a danger to us. They always had the mindset that we are living in their home. They were here first, and we should just respect them and be aware of our surroundings. For the most part, the wildlife leaves us and our livestock alone, other than Jacob, the black bear breaking into the grain shed, and the elk that eat the hay bales. We had a fairly large cougar who learned that our llamas made easy meals. The cougar ate all 9 of them in less than a year. The last straw was when I was walking in the horse pasture and interrupted the big cat's lunch, last llama. Luckily, one of the family dogs put himself between the cougar and I. I have no doubt if it wasn't for him, I'd not be here today. My dad decided he had to do something. He truly didn't want to use lethal methods and started researching other options. He came across a breeder who breeds hunting dogs and reached out. The breeder was extremely helpful and told my dad that most cougars have had some kind of run-in with hunting dogs, so they won't be as bold. So we bought a hunting dog, after doing lots of research on the breed and making sure that we could handle one. Gus Timberchopper was his name, and he was flown in from Virginia to Canada and quickly became a valuable family member. As everyone knows with any hound, the nose goes down and the ears turn off. Gus becomes a favorite of all our neighbors as his wandering helps with predators and livestock. Life was peaceful other than a few trips to the shelter to pick up Gus. The peace would not last long though. Enter entitled family. They saw our 5 dogs chilling on our property and decided they were abandoned or lost. Not the case. My brother and I were playing in the creek and the dogs had wandered away not too far, but far enough that the family didn't see us. The entitled family then pulled off the road and got out of the vehicle and started trying to coax the dogs into their van. 3 of our dogs ran back to the creek where we were playing. Our Pyrenees, Togo, and Gus stayed. The entitled dad somehow caught Gus and started dragging him to their van. Gus started to freak out. He started to bark, alerting me that something wasn't right. So I went to go see what was happening. Well, 12-year-old me saw some random guy trying to get Gus in his van, and the entitled kids and mom were gushing over how cute he was and how he will be the perfect dog for them. I wasn't too nervous as this happens often. People see the dogs, no house, and they think they're lost or someone dumped them, and try to help the owners by taking them to a shelter or vet, then often call or stop by to apologize for causing any inconvenience. I yelled out, "Hey, that dog isn't lost, he's with us." The entitled kids started to scream that they wanted the dog and they deserved the dog. Then they burst into uncontrollable sobs. The entitled mom asked me to come closer so we don't have to yell. I politely declined and said again that Gus was ours and asked the dad to please stop. Entitled dad grunted and tried to pick up Gus again. Gus ended up biting the guy on his hand. He didn't break the skin, it was more of a warning nip. The entitled dad let go and Gus came running back to me. Entitled dad looked furious and started to walk towards me and Gus, yelling that I shouldn't own dogs because clearly we don't train or properly care for them, and how much better of a home they could offer him. I was starting to panic because this guy looked so mad and he was raging that he would teach my dog proper manners. I'm backing away while holding onto Gus's collar. Togo quickly stood in front of me. I was begging the entitled dad to back off and to leave. Entitled dad said something along the lines of, "I'm taking this dog to teach you a lesson. If you don't look after your pets, they'll find a better home." I told him to stop, as Togo is very protective of me and my brother, and while he has lots of training, as he started showing signs of being too aggressive with people, we didn't want him to bite someone unprovoked. Entitled dad did stop for a moment, but the entitled mom and kids were screaming that they wanted this dog. It had to be this dog. Togo gave entitled dad lots of warnings, low growls, and bared teeth, lunging and snapping. Entitled dad tried to grab Gus by the collar again and ended up knocking me down. Togo latched onto the entitled dad's arm and started to shake his head and yank the guy off of his feet. One of the other dogs, she belonged to my uncle, came after I screamed and grabbed entitled dad by his pant leg, ripping it apart. My brother also joined because he heard me scream. I got him to take Gus and told him to run home and to get dad. Togo wouldn't listen when I told him to let go. Entitled kids and mom tried to get out to help. Thankfully, they listened when I told them to stop. Entitled dad was yelling to call the dog off and how he would see it that all of our dogs would be put down and that we would never be allowed to own another one again. At this point, I was scared, angry, and overwhelmed. I started to cry. I thought that Togo would be put down for sure, and that if entitled dad took us to court, he'd somehow get Gus. Togo let go of his arm, but made it clear that entitled dad was to stay on the ground. Anytime he tried to stand, Togo would knock him back down and growl in his face. My dad came racing down the driveway, ready for war. Entitled family started saying how Togo attacked unprovoked and that I misunderstood what they were doing. My dad told the family that the police and an ambulance will be arriving and that they best stay put, and if they decided to drive away, that he has pictures of the dad and vehicle and will press every kind of charges he legally can. My dad called some neighbors to come help if things went sideways. The police and ambulance arrive. Entitled dad needs stitches in his arm. They told the police that they thought the dogs weren't mine and that I was lying, and the kids want a dog so bad, but they don't want to pay for one. They saw ours and thought that they were strays. None of our dogs look like strays. They're all well-fed, brushed, and spoiled. Entitled dad then said that when I told him to stop or he could get hurt, he took it as I was threatening him, and that's why he didn't listen. Him and his wife were demanding that Togo be put down immediately and that we are animal hoarders who need to be charged and banned from owning any kind of animal. The police and paramedics told him he was very lucky. Togo is a guardian dog, and they're bred to be protectors. Togo was only trying to protect me. Entitled dad didn't care. He took us to court. Entitled dad got 34 stitches in his arm. In the courthouse, entitled mom came to my parents and said she had an offer. If they accepted, they'd drop the lawsuit. They wanted us to give them Gus. Dad told her no way. In the end, thanks to the game cameras Dad had in various places, we had footage. The judge was less than amused, as entitled family made it sound like I ordered my dog to attack them when they just wanted to play with the dog. Judge pointed out that a 12-year-old girl versus a 40-something-year-old man was not a fair fight, and that my dogs just evened the odds. We did have to isolate Togo and made sure that our dogs had microchips and their tattoos were legible. Dad also decided that he'd fence off my brother and I favorite places so that the dogs can't wander. I do wonder sometimes about entitled family, and I have 2 questions I'd love to ask. After all the expenses, wouldn't it have been cheaper to just buy a dog or adopt rather than trying to steal one? Don't bother me unless it's an emergency. This morning, I got into my car and realized I left my headlights on. Thankfully, modern technology meant it had automatically switched off when the key was removed, but it reminded me of a time where this wasn't so. Many years ago, I was working one of my first jobs in a little cafe, nearing the end of my training period. It was a quiet day, perfect to put the newbie on with only one experienced staff member. The experienced staff member called in sick. Boss had to come in and cover, until Sue could come in early. Boss wanted to use the time on site to do paperwork out the back. I'll be in here if you have any questions. I very annoyingly had a lot of questions. How to avoid an incorrect transaction, where to find more special paper for the credit card machine, what to do when the coffee grinder stopped working. Finally, boss said, "I'm busy. Don't bother me unless it's an emergency. Let me know when Sue is here." Shyly, I replied, "That's what I came to tell you. Sue just arrived." "Great. Any more questions? Ask her." Sue took over the coffee area and got me on restocking, clearing tables and emptying the bins, and other necessary grunt work. I went out to the outside bins through the little staff parking area and saw my boss's old car there with the headlights on. I went back to my boss's office. "Boss? Is it an emergency?" he snapped. "Not to me," I replied. "Then go away." I left quickly. I went to tell Sue instead. "Sue," then I changed my mind. Boss doesn't want to be disturbed unless it's an emergency, so I'm supposed to ask you if I have any more questions. Sue and I worked pleasantly until the end of my shift a few hours later. As I gathered my things to leave, Boss ran by me, knocking into me a bit. Without turning around to see if I was okay, Boss said, "Sorry, I'm in a rush." I slowed down to see what happened next, getting out my brick of a phone to text my mother I was on my way home. I could hear my boss losing it. "OP!" Oh no. Boss realized what I was going to tell him earlier. I was in trouble. "Can you bring your car in and give me a jump start? My battery is flat." Only a few cars could fit, so only senior staff and management could park there. I walked here. I live 10 minutes up the hill. I raced off before Boss could blame me. The next time I was on shift with Sue, I asked what happened to Boss. Headlights left on, got a flat battery. Boss tried to jumpstart it with my car, but it didn't work. Had to call a taxi. Funny that neither of us noticed the lights were on when we walked by it. And I realized, of course, she had to have seen it when she walked in. I can only imagine why she didn't say anything either. Am I the jerk for calling my brother-in-law a joke of a father in front of his family? My sister, Rachel, was married to Daniel, 40 male, for 8 years. They were high school sweethearts and they tied the knot shortly after their graduation. They had a daughter together, Alice, who's 16, who was Rachel's entire world. Rachel ended up diagnosed with cancer when she was only a few weeks away from delivery, and after Alice was born, she started chemo ASAP. It ended up being treatment-resistant and aggressive, and Rachel ended up passing by the time Alice was 2. Daniel emotionally checked out completely. He decided to take a job opportunity abroad, and he left Alice and mine in my wife's custody. At first, he said it was temporary, that he just needed to get things in order before Alice came to live with him. But eventually it was obvious that it would be much longer. He signed his rights over to us, and we've been raising her alongside our 3 sons. As far as the boys are concerned, Alice is their big sister, and as far as Alice is concerned, they're her little brothers. Daniel got remarried, and he had 2 daughters. Alice wasn't invited to the wedding. We only found out about it after his brother mentioned it to us. Daniel does send money for her, and they write letters back and forth like he and Rachel used to do in school. I know that there has to be some sort of part of him that loves his daughter, but it's hard to believe it considering how he's practically abandoned her after Rachel passed. Daniel's brother Wes has helped out a bit with Alice too. She'll go over to his house at least once a month to see him, his wife, and their kids. A few days ago, I was taking Alice over, and when we got there, we saw that Daniel and his wife and kids were there. I was ready to get back in the car and take Alice home, but Daniel saw us and came outside. He came up to Alice and tried to give her a hug, but she stepped back from him. He looked hurt, and when he asked why she didn't want to give her dad a hug, I snapped. I asked, how could he seriously stand there and refer to himself as her dad when all he's ever been to her is a pen pal? I called him a joke of a father and a sorry excuse for a man. His wife and their daughters overheard what I said. When Alice and I got back home, Wes called me and left a message saying that he agrees that Daniel hasn't been the best father to Alice, but I didn't need to tell him that in front of his wife and their kids. Daniel feels the same way. I did apologize to Alice for disparaging her father, but she just shrugged and said it would have only been disparaging if it wasn't true. My wife said she probably would have done worse if she had been there, but part of me does feel that I could have said it out of earshot of his kids. I'd say your heroic behavior in stepping up as a father figure for 14 years makes up for one slightly jerk comment, and the only reason it was a jerk comment was because it was in front of his kids. Not the jerk. They'll understand once they're older. Not allowed to remove my neck brace? Okay. Years ago, I was in a bad car accident. An older man turned left in front of me at an intersection and T-boned me. Ambulances were called. I was put on a backboard with a neck brace and brought to the hospital where I was deposited on the gurney in a hallway as there were no rooms available at the time. I laid there for quite a while waiting to be seen. My injuries weren't bad, basically just got banged around and bruised up, so I was okay with the waiting. But I was in pain and laying on my back was very uncomfortable. I didn't think there was anything wrong with my neck. The only pain I felt was due to the darn neck brace digging into the bottom of my skull, and I really wanted to lay in a different position. Not only to alleviate some of the pain in the rest of my body, hopefully, but also because I was parked right under a light that was blaring in my eyes the whole time. So I started taking off my neck brace. A nurse spotted me doing this and ran over very upset with me and told me I had to keep the neck brace on. I tried telling her my neck was fine, but she was adamant that I not remove the brace until the doctor had examined me, which I get. I'm guessing at the very least it goes very much against protocol, and at the very worst, it would have been a huge liability if I took the brace off and there was something wrong. Plus, I didn't want to upset the nurse or be one of those patients, so I begrudgingly complied, even though I thought it was overkill. I tried to reposition myself as best I could to the least painful position, not very successfully, unfortunately. However, the darn light blaring directly down was driving me crazy, even when I closed my eyes. Finally, out of frustration, I took the blanket that was over me, pulled it up more, and threw it over my head. Finally, no more light in my eyes. Bliss. I just laid there trying to block the pain and daydream to pass the time, wondering how long I would be there for. Not too long after, I hear what sounds like a bit of commotion and someone saying something about a deceased patient in the hallway. I was like, oh man, that's scary. I get that there are no rooms available, but to leave a deceased patient just laying out for everyone to see? I thought that was uber creepy. Suddenly, the same nurse that gave me crap about the neck brace pulls the blanket off of my head, scaring me, and she starts yelling at me that I'm not allowed to put the blanket over my head, and what was I doing? It was then that I realized the deceased patient they were talking about was me. I said, oh crap, I'm so sorry. I just wanted the light out of my eyes, and I can't move my head with this brace on. To say the nurse was not impressed would be an understatement, but she did find a room to move me and position me not under the light, which I thanked her very much for. She just gave me a look and walked away. Sorry. As someone who spent years working in the ER, this has gotta be one of my favorite stories we've read. The lack of rooms, uncomfortable patients, rude nurses, and deceased patients just lying around. Something tells me this was an HCA-owned hospital. I'm the reason they haven't fixed the lock in 20 years. I work in downtown Denver and had a couple of hours before an appointment, so I decided to go get lunch. I'll occasionally pop into one of the places I used to work at because I know the food is really good. Every time I go into this one place, I remember what happened to me one time 20 years ago. I was having a beer and the bar was slow, so I was chatting with the bartender and telling the story to him. 20 years ago, I was a server at this particular place and they had a no cell phone policy. Yes, we had cell phones 20 years ago. You had to leave it in your locker or get written up. I already had one write-up, so I put mine in my locker and went about greeting my first table. It was slow and I had the urge to go to the bathroom, so I went before the rush would hit. I washed my hands and tried to open the door and nothing. The lock had broken. I started knocking on the door. Now, the employee bathroom was located back by the lockers, kind of tucked off in a corner of the kitchen, away from the line where people would be. So I start pounding on the door. Anytime I heard a noise, I'd pound on the door and yell. But the noise of a busy kitchen and lunch rush drowned me out. 15 minutes goes by, still no one. Another 10 minutes, now I'm wondering how I'm supposed to get out of here and how long am I going to be stuck in here. Then I heard a noise close by and I started yelling and pounding on the door. Someone had gone to their locker for cigarettes. They heard me. They told me I had been triple set and they couldn't find me and the manager was furious with me. Of course, I'm relaying my situation to them. They get the manager who comes over and tells me to open the door. Duh, I can't. They had to track down the maintenance guy who was another 20 minutes away, but luckily the hinges were on the outside of the door and he was able to get me out. By now, I'd been in there for the better part of an hour. First thing the manager said to me, they said with an angry voice, "Why didn't you just call us with your cell phone?" Of course, they also had to check the lock to make sure I wasn't making the story up, and I wasn't. My first table was understanding and laughed about it with me, but left me no tip. I didn't get sat at another table that day. So I finished telling the bartender this story. I go to use the restroom, and when I came back, he's confirmed with the GM the reason the employee bathroom has a sliding bolt latch instead of a lock on the door handle is so an employee can't get locked in there. The GM never knew who that person was though, as they had taken over years after I had left. They both bought me a beer. Am I the jerk for refusing to put my fiance's daughter on my airline benefits? I, male 31, have two siblings, a sister who's 23 and a brother who's 37. Me and my siblings are all very close. I'm especially really close to my little sister, Shannon. Me and my siblings have the same mom, but different dads. Me and my brother know our fathers, while my younger sister, her dad walked out on her at 4, and she knows nothing about him. Also, my mom passed from cancer 5 years ago. My sister always jokes that she's an orphan, but she suffered some serious depression since our mom passed, and it's been challenging, but she's so much better. I'm a higher up at an airline, and I decided to put her on my benefits, which allows her to fly for free, and now she travels all the time and is living out her early 20s, and I can't be any more happier. Her goal is to visit places our mom could never go to because she had us so young. Recently, I got engaged to my fiance, Taylor, who's 29, and Taylor has a daughter who's 6, Maddie, and Maddie's dad isn't really in her life, and I took on the father figure role, and I have no issue with that. Since me and Taylor are getting married, I told her she can be added to my flight benefits as a wife, and she brought up, what about Maddie? And I told her she couldn't be added given I only have 4 people on my account, my dad, my brother, my sister, and now Taylor. I told her I hit the max of people on my account, and she wasn't pleased with that. She recommended I take off Shannon because she doesn't actually work, and it's time for her to get an actual job and pay for her own flight tickets. I took very much offense to that. She's right, my sister doesn't work, but that's because she's in school and she lives off the inheritance my mom left us, so it's not like a freeloader. I told her she's being ridiculous because I get 8 buddy passes a year, and if me, her, and Maddie wanted to go on a trip, she can still come, but we'll just have to pay at most $60 a ticket. She told me I'm being a jerk for not including her daughter in my flight benefits, when really, I don't get how, given her daughter is in school the majority of the year and will most likely not use the benefits as much as my sister uses it now. So, am I the jerk? Edit. Why I don't want to remove brother or father is, my dad is a senior in his retirement and I want him to have the option to travel when he feels comfortable to. And as for my older brother, he has a wife and kids, and since he's on the account, he can fly for free and his family can use buddy passes. If he's off the account, he can't fly without me or use a buddy pass because he isn't on the account. It's hard to explain, but if he's not on the account, he can't use buddy passes with his wife without me being present. Let's break this down. Your fiance, the woman you love so much till death do you part, her daughter that loves you enough to consider you a father. What part of this is hard for you? In the future, if you have a biological kid with your fiance, will you want that one on the list? Are you seriously hearing yourself? Maybe put your dad on the buddy list system instead. How often does he fly? Now, to be fair, I see the logic in your thinking. I do, really. How often will you need to fly the kid places, being in school and all? But the same could be said for your sister, who is also in school most of the year. Maybe talk it out. The whole group all talk together. Explain your views and hear theirs. Actually hear them out and come to an actual agreement. I guarantee this will work itself out when you do. You're the jerk, but there's hope for you yet. My question is, are you sure you want to marry her? Yeah, sounds to me like she's showing you her true colors. These are some major red flags, and you deserve so much better. Oh, Reddit boy, you're really catching on to the Reddit lingo, aren't you? We've been reading these stories every day for the past 5 years. I literally hear this stuff in my sleep at this point. My neighbor is hoarding animals, and it's ruining my quality of life. Should I report her? This lady moved into the neighborhood a couple years ago and turned her very small backyard into an overcrowded hoarding situation with way too many animals. Now she's turning me into a Karen. So for context, it's me, my husband, and our dog. Nice, quiet, residential neighborhood. House next to me has a small farm. Chickens, roosters, ducks, turtles, rabbits, and cats that are extremely invasive and have taken over my yard and have destroyed everything in it and use it as a bathroom all over. We have a 1-year-old boxer who now can't play in our fenced-in backyard. The neighbor's cats are always using it as a bathroom, and when I try and talk to the neighbor, her response is that I must firmly tell them that they're doing a bad thing and then tell them to never ever come in my yard again, as it's my responsibility to keep them out. Like, what? One of her cats did test positive for worms, as animal control made her get them tested and share the results. And because she won't keep them out of our yard, instead of letting our dog go out to play and use the bathroom, she now has to be leashed, and we hit the dog park 2 times a day. Not complaining about the dog park, but some days I don't want to scan the yard for cat crap, and I just want to stay home. I'm also afraid my dog will catch and hurt the animals. She's not vicious, just a boxer that likes to chase and jump. One of her chickens decided to escape and went to the bathroom all over my car. It scratched up the hood and cost about $1,100 to get it fixed. She keeps the duck inside at night and puts it out at 5 a.m. when it starts quacking nonstop until 8ish when she brings it in. The roosters go off all hours of the night and day. So now I get up at 5 a.m. every day. I guess I might as well take up jogging. I work at home. The duck and roosters are so bad that I moved my office to the other side of my house so I can work in peace. But this duck roams the neighborhood and has taken up residence in my driveway. If I was a paranoid person, I would think he was stalking me. I love animals, and I'm not a get off my lawn type of person, But the invasiveness of her animals and her lack of responsibility is driving me nuts. I've already sent some pictures and a formal complaint to animal control where they came out and they fined her. Code enforcement handles the other animals, and they also came out and made her get rid of the roosters and said she can only have a total of 6 birds, so she had to get rid of chickens too. Today my husband gets home and there's a turtle in the driveway. I ask her if it's hers, and sure enough, she said yes. And so are the 4 in your backyard. Totally not mad about the turtles, just that every day it's something new that escapes her house. I'm ready to call animal control and code enforcement again, and a real estate lawyer. We can't use our yard. I can't open windows on the very few nice days we have. I can't sleep in on my days off. My dog can't play in her yard. I can't talk to her anymore because of the nonsense coming out of her mouth. Even animal control said she has issues and code enforcement is tired of her, but also not willing to do anything. Set up cameras outside. If you had video or pictures of the chickens on your car, take her to small claims court for that $1,100. She doesn't lose sleep making your life heck. Return the favor. Call animal control, call zoning, call a lawyer. You have a right to enjoy your yard, and she has an obligation to keep her animals under control. My boyfriend demands my friends and family call him Dr. Jones instead of by his first name. My boyfriend, who's 32, is a doctor. I met him through my dad back when we were traveling, and after we started dating, he started coming over to my hometown to visit. When I introduced him to my family and friends, I told them his full name, then occupation, then mentioned the other stuff like age and hometown, etc. All good until months later when he started complaining about my family and friends referring to him by his first name and not putting doctor before. I found this strange. I told him that's his professional title, but as a society, we use first names, nicknames, etc. He said he can't help but feel annoyed, especially considering that these people don't know him well. But it's been 8 months. He even said once we're married or engaged, then they can start referring to him using his first name. Recently, he started correcting whenever my friends or family call him by his name. His tone becomes aggressive, and then he goes on a long lecture about how they should put doctor before mentioning his name. It became exhausting because my friends and family can't understand his strange hang-up, and he keeps picking fights with them about it. Last night, we were visiting my parents, and my dad called him Justin instead of Dr. Justin. My boyfriend started arguing with him, which caused a huge fight in the house, and we ended up leaving. In the car, he went off on me, saying I'm letting friends and family disrespect him continually by letting them call him by just his first name. I told him he was at fault here, and he was being unreasonable because what he's expecting is bizarre. He said he takes pride in his profession and that he sacrificed so much to get to where he is today, and my family and friends literally lose nothing if they respect his wishes. He called me an enabler and said that siding with them paints me in a bad light and advised me to step up and take a stand. But again, I thought he was overreacting and being hostile for no reason. We got home and he shut me down and refused to speak to me. Mom called me later and we talked a bit. Today he's gone completely radio silence, but the look on his face is telling. Am I the jerk? Edit. We don't have anyone who's a doctor in the family or friend groups, but we know for certain that we don't use people's professional titles all the time when addressing them, especially not people we have a relationship with. I don't understand how me and my family are offending him. He is choosing this hill to die on apparently. I smell a narcissist, not the jerk. He has a God complex, which is not an uncommon trait in doctors. Not saying they all have it, but it's not uncommon either. He's super full of himself. I can't imagine dating someone or even being friends or acquaintances with someone who insisted on being called doctor in a social setting. Am I the jerk for telling my husband's nurse that she doesn't get to dictate who is and isn't allowed in my home? My husband, who's 36, has been in the hospital for weeks. He just got discharged, but he needs home care. We got him a nurse to be able to monitor his medical devices. His nurse comes over to handle stuff like catheter, cannula insertions, and medication intake. I've noticed she's been acting a bit rude and overstepping by trying to tell me when to enter my bedroom where my husband is staying, or when the kids get to come in. I already told her how I felt about her attitude, and she claimed she was just doing her job, making sure that my husband is getting enough rest. Yesterday, my parents came over to visit my husband since they had been planning to come for a while, but couldn't find time. I opened the door for them and led them towards the bedroom. The minute we walked in, the nurse started redirecting us outside. I was confused. I asked what was she doing, and she told me she was in the middle of removing my husband's catheter, and this wasn't a time for a visit. I nearly laughed, but she forced us out and shut the door. I was fuming. I had my parents go into the living room, then came back and started arguing with her. She told me that my husband was in a vulnerable state and needed privacy, and she, as his nurse, simply provided it to him and had my visitors go wait outside. I told her this is my home, my bedroom, and those were my parents coming over to see my husband and check in on him, so they were his visitors as well. She told me it wasn't the right time for a visit, but I told her that she's in my home, and she was overstepping by trying to dictate who is and who isn't allowed in to see my husband. I told her I'd report her for this attitude, and she kept saying that she was just trying to do her job and told me to go ask my husband about how he felt about having people see him in such a state. I asked her to leave. Then after my parents were done with their visit, I tried to talk to my husband. He told me he did feel like his privacy was being violated and that I was being too harsh on the nurse. I told him that my parents were worried sick and wanted to see him. He said this wasn't the right time and basically backed the nurse up. We got into an argument over this, and then he told me to let it go and let the nurse do her job. But I said that she keeps acting aggressively and like I was some outsider in my own home. Am I the jerk in this situation, or is she really overstepping? You're the jerk. Her job is to provide care and to advocate for your husband. The fact that he sided with her should tell you that you are out of line. Having a catheter replaced is always done behind closed doors. They kick you and your folks out of the hospital room for that, so her insisting on his privacy is normal. And you're acting like it was some huge inconvenience and waited ages. It was a few minutes, so chill. Your folks will understand. She may be abrupt with what she's doing, or she may be having to be forceful because you're not listening. If the nurse says, now isn't a good time for the kids or whoever to visit, don't say, whatever, this is my home. Listen to her. It's not just your bedroom, it's his convalescence room too. He needs time, space, and privacy, and a good nurse will ensure he gets those even if a wife is being a little too entitled. And your husband agrees with her. Then why are you even asking? You're the jerk. The nurse is being the bad guy, so your husband doesn't have to be. Any half-decent nurse will take the fall by throwing out anyone the patient doesn't want to see. You're the jerk, OP, and calm down. As a nurse, I can 100% confirm this is the case. She's asking you to leave to protect the privacy of her patient. That is her job. No man wants to go through a painful procedure like this in front of their in-laws. Get a grip. This isn't about you. Drop your attitude and be there for him. You're the jerk. Medical professional here. The job of the nurse is to take care of her patient's needs, not yours. So yeah, you're the jerk. She wasn't dictating who could see your husband, but when they could see him. Also, if the nurse is telling you your husband needs more rest, it's probably because he said something to her. If he was in the hospital for weeks and still needs a catheter, etc., he probably does need a ton of rest. Maybe you do too. Having a husband who's sick and you having to take care of your kids alone is a lot of stress. I am hoping you can have someone watch him and the kids for a bit and go have some time with your friends. Caretakers need care too. Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video. Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.